What is the most toxic thing a parent can say to a child? I'm tired of pretending to love you. Wow, I thought it was going to be hard to top my dad's I'm going to kill myself and it's your fault but I found it. Talk shit about the other parent then compare you to them. You're just like your father. Right in the childhood trauma. Yeah, man. I'd forgotten how much that one stung. Getting hit with this one when I'm still waiting for his phone call for my 6th birthday and especially getting my hopes up when I turn 10, 14, 16, 18 and 20. When I was young I would call my dad, and he would say I'm coming over to get you and I would sit by the window and wait for him, he would never come. My mom said it was heartbreaking to see. I've seen him maybe 12 times in my life, I'm 40 now and it still hurts. Hug. I know the feeling. Last time I saw my bio dad I was 10. 20 years later he walked by me and he didn't even recognize me. I keep telling myself I don't care, but boy oh boy, that ducked up all my relationships, cause I keep thinking everyone will walk out on me. People need to wait better if they want kids, it's not fair to put a kid in the world to walk out on them like this. I wish you were never born. I was gonna say I wish you died at birth like my mom said to me, but that's close enough. Parents actually say this? Ouch. Hope things are better for you now. Life would be better without you. You are the reason for our misery. Ah yes, the good old we can't take responsibility for our choices, so let's take it out on you kinds of bastards. Heard that one so many times. Starting around 7 years old. 2 decades later it still hurts. Sure, I know it wasn't my fault. People are kind and will repeat that until they're blue in the face, but what many don't seem to understand is knowing doesn't erase the pain. Imagine someone sticks out their leg and trips a person without getting caught, and the person breaks their arm. 10 years later, that person learns the truth, that it wasn't their fault. But that doesn't take away the residual pain, or surgical screws, or persistent difficulty using that arm from the damage done. Some people seem to move on a lot more effectively than others, but some don't. And I want to remind anyone in that boat that it's okay. You can hurt, you are under no obligation to move on any sort of time frame, and there isn't necessarily something wrong with you for still hurting. Letting that pain control your decisions is another deal, but it seems like we often end up with this shame of not being able to move on, smiling uncomfortably and nodding when friends aggressively repeat, "It wasn't your fault." Until they stop, and the like. It wasn't your fault, but you are no less for still hurting from it. 3. Thank you for saying this. I was abused by my parents until I moved out at 20. When I finally confronted them about it, later than I should have, I was just told to stop blaming them, and I don't think I've recovered from that statement. A year later I had to take my father off of life support. I still miss him very much, but there are so many times when I realize how much of a piece of shit he was that only cared about himself. When I was 11 I overheard my mother telling someone that at least my looks meant she didn't have to worry about me being molested or raped. That ducked me up for years. Man, I'm so sorry. My mom said something similar but less horrible and it still bothers me. She said I'm not good looking enough to get a guy to marry me. The only way I'd ever find a guy is if I have a good education and can make a good career out of it to get good money. Insulting your intelligence is a horrible thing for a parent to do. Something where if a friend or a stranger had said it you might just laugh, shrug it off, but your own parent saying it? A good parent should stay away from anything that can ruin your self-esteem because they hold a lot more power than they tend to realize. My parents said I should have known who won all the World Cups, capital city of each country, all meanwhile they kept telling me to shut up whenever I asked questions. The whole time I was in school I tried my hardest to be the smartest person in the room, until now I don't believe it when friends tell me I'm smart. Sounds like my parents. With an added side of whenever a topic I was knowledgeable about came up and I could turn it around, you don't expect me to remember that stupid shit, do you? My 9-year casually throws out information that he's learned at school during the day week. Sometimes I ask what has learned and he says he forgets lol. But the times he talks to me about what he's learned, I make a note about it, tell him it's really interesting, he'll ask me if I knew any of that info. Sometimes I will, other times I won't. Then I go and look up as much info as my tiny brain can register. And the next day on the way to school I engage in conversation with and ask him questions I know he can answer, but I know the actual terminology for as I spent the night reading lol, and we will do this daily until he gets bored and forgets a subject. It could be weeks before he tells me what he has learned again. But I try so much to learn it too, as I figure he's interested in that information enough to tell me all about it. There's a lot I don't remember. No, I would never tell him you expect me to remember that shit, do you? I try to remember that again or learn, because he's knowledgeable about it. Making me cry over here. Lamau. So you're saying that I'm a bad parent in response to any form of help seeking of constructive criticism was the worst for me. Your uncle wouldn't mess with you if you didn't walk around the house like a slut, not told to me, but a childhood friend. Her uncle was arrested a few years after that, but the thing that hurt her the worst is that her mother assumed it was her fault. Wow, I can relate. When I told my grandma that dad had molested me, she basically said I must have asked for it by wearing something provocative. I was 16 at the time and wore a hoodie and jeans. Needless to say, I wasn't going to get any help. I couldn't have told anyone else anyway because I was afraid people wouldn't believe me, and my dad told everyone I was retarded to humiliate and discredit me. As an adult, I have long since cut off all ties and connections to my dad. I'm free of him. When I tried to tell my granny dad's mom that my dad was inappropriately touching me, she told me he would never do something like that. Ducked up part about that is my dad had already been to jail for molesting my sister and some of my cousins before I was born. Also, my dad started telling everyone that I lie for attention so that no one would believe anything I said. The takeaway I'm getting from this thread is that if I ever hear someone say their children lie for attention, I should probably check on their kids. The awful part of this is that negative attention-seeking behavior, lying, doing things they know they shouldn't to get attention, acting out inappropriately with their peers, are all common responses to sexual abuse in children. It's all extremely hard to get that kid past a place where they seek that negative attention because most often they have nothing positive to refer to. Know the signs. Be vigilant. Know that kids will often lie about small things or let their imagination run wild, but ex-adult touched me badly is almost never a statement that needs additional evaluation. It needs to be taken straight to the hospital for a checkup with a pediatrician the opposite sex as that adult in question, followed by a call to the police. Rain warning signs. Stop it now. Warning signs in children and adolescents. If you've lived through this abuse, you are worth your recovery and you will always be more than what was done to you. Damn, this thread is just validating that some people should not be parents. Yep. The difference between the parents described on this thread and many of the children telling the stories is that at least the children can acknowledge kids aren't for them. My mother never wanted kids, but she convinced herself she did and proceeded to abuse us. I also never want kids, and I have the foresight to know that if I had any kids I'd be very likely to duck them up in some way, so I won't force myself to have any. Edit to add, fui you, I don't want kids for many reasons and not just because of my upbringing. It's not that I'm scared I'll mess up, I just recognize that, like my mother, kids just annoy me by existing. Unlike my mother, I don't plan to have one anyway and just punish it for existing. This actually happened to my cousin. Her father committed suicide when she was 8. From then on, her mother became an alcoholic. After losing custody of her kids, she was eventually granted the ability to see her kids unsupervised, which did not pan out. The kids spent the weekend with her, but pretty soon she started drinking very heavily. My cousin told her she would have to tell another adult that she was drinking, and the mom started calling her all sorts of terrible names, so my cousin ran to the bathroom and locked the door behind her. I swear to God, the mom actually said to her own 15-year-old daughter, "When the police ask you why both your parents are dead, you'll know what to tell them. I'm going to kill myself just like your father did, and both will be your fault." My cousin is so sweet, funny, and pretty, and she's one of my favorite people in the planet. She is so kind, and she got dealt a shitty hand. Your cousin probably still needs help, because she might consciously or unconsciously think that saying certain things to people will cause them to commit suicide. Especially because she is such a nice person, I am saying this. You're probably right there. Losing a parent to suicide significantly increases the suicide risk for their children. I really hope she has lots of support now.